The Prix Galien is a welcome initiative to stimulate creative research and promote excellence. Barack Obama. The Galien Awards ceremony is considered the equivalent of the Oscars night for the innovators in the labs and awards every year the best pharmaceutical product, the best biotechnology product, the best medical technology, and the best digital health product.
This is the right event, on the right issue, at the right time.
I thank His Excellency, the President, for bringing Prix Galien to Africa, and I look forward to the day when we will celebrate an African winner of the Prix Galien.
I'm particularly grateful to receive this award.
The awards are among the highest honors in science and commerce because they lead to improvement in the human condition.
The Prix Galien Awards recognize the world's brightest minds and most innovative companies. They are a true celebration of the hard work required to produce life-changing interventions.
That is what makes us optimistic about the future.
Congratulations to all of you.
Make a difference. Join the Galien Foundation. The Galien Week of Innovation has been made possible thanks to our precious friends and partners who share the Galien Foundation's values. First off, the two exclusive platinum partners are We would now like to acknowledge our two gold partners. Furthermore, we proudly introduce our corporate leaders partners. The associate partners are the grantors are To conclude, we are extremely fortunate to work with outstanding media partners who have contributed to the Galien Foundation's renown.
Hello, everyone. Hello, wherever you are in the world. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the Galien America Foundation's Week of Innovation webinars. This is also known as the Oscars in Medicine. So my name is Pamela Tenart, and I'm Medible's Chief Science Officer. The objective this week is to provide initial content and background for our largest annual event, the Prix Galien USA Awards, to be held this Thursday in New York, in conjunction with the annual Galien Forum of speakers representing top scientific experts and leaders in global health. This webinar series was developed to give all our nominees for best categories, whether that's pharmaceutical, biotech, or MedTech, and digital solutions, greater visibility in describing their journey to medical discovery. It's especially timely as it's the Galien's 50th Golden Jubilee Award this year, culminating in December with the first global events in Africa to recognize the best of the best biomedical innovations of the last 50 years. This year's Galien USA Awards has a record number of nominees, 84 in 4 categories, 65 companies covering 15 varied therapeutic areas ranging from cancer, cardiology, neurosciences, infectious disease, and very rare genetic diseases. Because the number of nominees and the range of conditions represented by all this excellent science, the Galien Committee has decided to host a series of 14 webinars this week prior to Thursday's award ceremony, where the winners in each of the categories will be announced. Today, we start off with the MedTech category, and we'll be holding 3 of the webinars due to the large number of products representing this year's innovation. In this webinar, in the hour we have, it's devoted to 4 nominees in diagnostic and digital therapeutics. And what we cover today relates to this central question: how far have we come to achieve the health system world of the connected patient? To provide some context, medical devices are at the heart of healthcare's search for innovation that increase process efficiencies, improve patient outcomes, and realize the ambitions of a value-based payment system based on data from connected and digitally enabled products. The product nominees today demonstrate how such technologies can work in practice in key therapeutic areas, again, from cancer to essential hand tremor. We will have the opportunity for audience questions, so please put them in your Q&A section that you can find at the bottom of your screen in the link provided on your screen. Before we're going to move into our discussion, we have a quick poll. What I can do is I can read the question to you. I'll wait a second until our technical crew can bring that up. But basically, it's a multiple choice, so you can pick answers within the next minute or so. So what's the most promising new medical advance that we can achieve within the next 5 to 10 years? Is it vaccines for major global killers like HIV, malaria, and tuberculosis? Is it solving the blood-brain barrier lead that advances against a variety of neurological disorders? Is it introduction of comprehensive diagnostics and therapeutic vaccines as a preventive tool against a wide variety of cancers? Further refinement of safe, clinically effective CAR T therapies and all other gene and gene editing therapies across tissue types and disease conditions? Or is it the widespread use of patient-friendly digital and biosensor platform technologies that control or prevent the progression of major chronic diseases? So we have an option to enter your answer here. And before we get to, at the very end of the webinar, we will go through the answers that you've provided and take a look at what you think. So with that, I'll start by introducing our nominees today, participating their scientific and clinical representatives of the products that are nominated in the MedTech category. So I'm gonna start off by introducing Renee Ryan, and they'll give you some more information as well. She's the CEO of Cala Health, and their nominated product is the Cala Trio. It's the first non-invasive targeted therapy that will reduce hand tremors for adults living with essential tremor. And it's referred to as electricity as medicine. It's not the first time electricity was used, but maybe it's the most novel use to date. And in 2020, they won the Edison Award for this technology. Dr. Eric Mays is the CEO of Indomag, and their nominated product is the Megatrace lymphatic tracer. It's the first world's non-radioactive dual tracer for lymphatic mapping in women with breast cancer, really getting at those sentinel lymph nodes. And just coming out of October, which is Breast Cancer Month, it's clear how important this technology could be. Next up, we have, and Yuri had some technical issues, so I don't know if he's made it or not, but we will have Yuri as well. We have Yuri Marichich, CMO, Head of Development of Repaira Therapeutics. Their nominated product is a prescription digital therapeutic for opioid and substance disorder disease. Their product is called the Reset and the Reset O, and they were the first pieces of software authorized by the Food and Drug Administration to treat that kind of disease. With an estimated 20 million people suffering from substance abuse, you can imagine how important innovations like these are. Lastly, but not least, we have Dr. Eric Chan, who's Director of Product Management at Teva Pharmaceuticals. And their nominated product is the Digihealer, which is a family of digital inhalers with a companion app. And what they do is record really how often you use your inhaler, what the airflow is as you use it. And again, a very important therapeutic innovation. I also want to make sure that you all know you should have a link that you can click on with a 100-word statement submitted by the companies on behalf of the products to see what they are about beyond what I just told you. And what I'm going to do now is maybe start off by asking Renee, there's 3 questions we sort of had, and we gave everyone the option of answering whichever one you wanted. But in what way does your technology represent a breakthrough over the previous standard of care? And how significant was the level of unmet medical need? And the other question is there an impact you can cite on clinical outcome for patients? And what challenges did your company confront in transitioning from early proof of concept to regulatory clearance for marketing? So Renee, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you tell us a little bit about your company and the product. That's so amazing.
Sure. Thanks, Pamela. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank you.
Super. Thanks for having me today. We're really honored to be part of the Prix Galien Award Week. I am the CEO of Cala Health. Cala was founded in 2015. We were spun out of the Stanford Biodesign program. The initial idea came from work that my founder had done in the field of neurosurgery and deep brain stimulation. She noticed that by reaching into the brain to treat the VIM, which is the central tremor network of the brain, with DBS probes, you could, when doing those surgeries, actually prove that you're in the right location by actually sweeping a paintbrush over the palm of a patient's wrist as they're awake on the table in a DBS procedure. That innovation led to our first product, which is the Cala Trio. It was approved as a de novo product in 2018. It is for, as you indicated, adults living with hand tremors or in a condition of essential tremor. It is a very, very significant disease. It's the most prevalent movement disorder in the world. In the United States alone, there are about 7 to 10 million Americans that struggle with essential tremors. In fact, there's 25 million globally that also are identified as having essential tremor. So what the technology is, it looks like a wristwatch. It stimulates 2 nerves at the wrist. Those nerves deliver electrical energy, which is what nerves are supposed to do, into the brain to reduce the oscillations and therefore reduce the hand tremors in those patients. Essential tremor patients struggle very frequently with debilitating side effects. So hand tremors is one condition that they suffer from, but oftentimes you see high prevalence of things like anxiety, social isolation, and depression in these patients as well. So along our way, we did 2 randomized controlled studies that led to our de novo approval, as I mentioned, in 2018. After completing that approval, we had an option. We could go commercialize the product, or we could run a very large chronic at-home use study. We chose to do the latter. It was the largest study ever run in an essential tremor patient population. It was 263 patients in the United States, 3 months of chronic at-home use, and we had phenomenal results. We saw that 92% of all of our patients actually achieved relief of their hand tremors during that 3-month study. Important to note, as we're talking about connected care, the device has motion sensors built into it. Those motion sensors allow for the personalization of our therapy when a patient first onboards with the technology. We also use those motion sensors to read the tremor benefit after the dose, the electrical stimulation dose has occurred. So we know dose by dose tremor benefits in these patients that have been struggling for decades with no other options. So we're excited to be here to talk about it and happy to share more.
Well, that's super exciting, and I'm glad you were able to give us more information about that. That is a real step forward, I imagine, for a lot of patients that live with that essential tremor. So thank you. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Mays to give a little bit of background and answer any of those questions that I just posed. Eric, I just want to make sure we can hear you.
Okay, Pamela, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Yes,
Go
like
ahead.
Renee, I'm very pleased and honored to be here as on the short list for the Prix Galien. And I'm the CEO of Indomag. So we're a company based in the United Kingdom. And our product is the Mag Trace tracer and something called the Sintimag, which is a localization system. As Pamela, you'd already noted, it is October, which is International Breast Cancer Month. And people are probably aware that 1 in 8 women risk breast cancer within their lifetime. And at the moment, it's around 2.3 million cases annually. But despite all the advances in new techniques and new therapies, the incidence rate is continuing to grow. How MagTrace and Sintimag fit into the picture is that when breast cancer is diagnosed, one of the next questions that the patients and surgeons or clinicians have is, has that cancer spread? And the route for spread is typically to go to the lymph nodes, in the case of breast cancer, in the armpit region, something called the axilla. And prior to 2010, the standard of care was to remove all of those lymph nodes in a process called an axillary lymph node dissection, which came with a lot of morbidities such as potential risk of nerve damage, the loss of lymphatic drainage from the arm, so the arm would swell up in a painful condition called lymphedema. And in 2010, a couple of big randomized control trials read out on the concept of finding a sentinel node. This is a node that the cancer would spread to first. And if you could find that node, looking at the predictive value versus taking out all of those lymph nodes, it's not pathology. And indeed, what was shown at that time was that taking out 1 or 2 lymph nodes on average had the same predictive value as doing that big invasive surgery with all its morbidities. And that was great. So that was, really practice changing. However, the sentinel lymph node biopsy concept relied on access to nuclear medicine. So a radioisotope would be injected near the tumor or just underneath the nipple. That material would flow through the lymphatics and get taken up by these lymph nodes, the sentinel nodes, and then a surgeon would use a Geiger counter to localize those nodes. And that works very, very well. It has a very high detection rate, or roughly 95%. But what they found is, or what is found is, not everyone has access to nuclear medicine. Not just that, but even sites that do have access to nuclear medicine, the nuclear medicine in question, or the radioisotope in question, technetium-99, has a 6-hour half-life. And so that limits the time between which you can do the injection and when you can follow up with the surgery. And so Indomag was set up as a similar to Cala Health, an academic spin-out, a cross-Atlantic one between the University of Houston and the University College London, to replace that radioisotope with a magnetic nanoparticle that would be injected and replace the Geiger counter with a very sensitive magnetometer called the Indomag. And we got our European approvals in 2011. We got our PMA approval from the FDA in 2016. We have now treated over 80,000 patients across 43 countries, so very global spread of this, and it provides multiple benefits, basically providing that standard of care to people who couldn't normally access it in the past. There is one little tweak that I would note, given that it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, is that there's another disease, sort of a pre-cancer disease called ductal carcinoma in situ, that it's roughly 20% of cancers, and people that experience this, in order to determine whether it's invasive cancer or not, basically it's cells in the milk ducts that start to go rogue. And if they break through the milk ducts, then it's invasive cancer and the tissue needs to be managed. Well, because of that, and because that tissue is removed to do the pathology, quite often you would need to do the sentinel lymph node biopsy at the same time as that procedure, because all the lymphatic pathways are removed as part of the surgical procedure. Given that MagTrace not only can be injected and has this longer sort of, it has a 3-year shelf life, but it can be injected and stay within the body, be detectable for weeks, it means that you can mark those nodes in advance of the surgery, do the surgery, look at the pathology, and if it turns out that that wasn't an invasive cancer, you can save that patient a sentinel lymph node biopsy. And what we found is this is, saving roughly 80% of the DCIS cases, and that's about 250,000 patients. We can save them an unnecessary surgery, which is great for the patients and great for hospitals in terms of decreasing the overall cost of care.
That is such a great story to hear. And I love how you mentioned those early trials in the 2000s, because I think I was part of those with the hospital I was working at. So it's so fabulous to see that technology can be, expanded and made available to many more people. And that's one subject we'll talk about later, is health disparities and access to care. But thank you for that. And again, as everyone knows, breast cancer month this month. So still time to donate to those breast cancer charities as well. Next, we're going to turn over to Dr. Yuri Marichik, who's a Chief Medical Officer and Head of Development at Therapeutics. That's another organization I've been following for years. They've done some amazing work, and I can't wait to hear what you'll talk to us about your product for a substance abuse disorder. Yuri, I hope we can hear you.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Take it away.
Thanks for having me. So Yuri Marichik, I'm Chief Medical Officer at Repaira, been with Repaira since 2014. And what we do is develop software to treat diseases based on the insight that software can change our behavior and also change our neurobiology and neurophysiology. We have 3 therapeutics on the market: Reset for patients with substance use disorder, Reset-O for patients with opioid use disorder, and Somryst for patients with chronic insomnia, a number in development. In terms of Reset and Reset-O, the way these work is these are based on the insight that Patients with addiction can have basically dysfunction in a number of neurocircuits. And so we deliver behavioral treatment that either works alone or in combination with drugs. For patients with cocaine, cannabis, and stimulant use disorder, there is in fact no medications that are FDA approved for those patients. And so Reset is in fact the only therapeutic that is FDA market authorized to treat those patients at all. Reset-O, on the other hand, which we'll talk a little bit about in a moment, is for patients with opioid use disorder. In patients with opioid use disorder, there are medications such as buprenorphine that reduce cravings, but the requirements both by FDA and in fact by federal and state law is that they should be prescribed in combination with behavioral treatment, because the clinical data shows those patients do better than just receiving medication. But unfortunately, the vast majority, essentially almost 80% of patients, do not receive recommended behavioral treatment. We are in the face of a massive epidemic in substance use and opioid use disorder. Many of us probably opened up the newspaper or clicked on the news or saw it on TV before the pandemic of COVID, and we've only seen it worsen. It took 5 years up to before 2020 for a 30% increase in opioid overdoses. And in the 2020 calendar year, we saw another 30% increase in only 1 year, what previously took 5 years. So there is much that needs to be done, because what we've been doing to now has not worked. And so the hope is that by bringing digital treatments to patients and meeting them where they are, that this can help. Both Reset and Reset-O provide 3 mechanisms of action. The first is an addiction-specific form of cognitive behavioral therapy called CRA that helps patient move from actively using a substance to reducing and discontinuing. The second is something called fluency training, which is a means of assessing the patient's proficiency in reinforcing concept mastery. And then the third is something called contingency management, which is a positive reinforcement mechanism, and it induces a dopamine response in the nucleus accumbens, which is one of the pleasure centers of the brain, and helps to compete with a similar dopamine response when patients use substances, but rather instead rewards them with that dopamine response when they're engaged in treatment or when they have a negative urine drug screen. And so Reset received de novo market authorization back in 2017. As I mentioned, it was the first piece of software to receive that, and that was based on randomized clinical trial data that showed an improvement in abstinence or achieving no substance use, as well as retention and treatment in a randomized clinical trial. Reset-O received breakthrough status from FDA and then received FDA market authorization from a similar study. And then the last thing I'll just say that I'm really excited about around the convergence of traditional drug development with digital treatments is the ability to evaluate real-world data. And so now that these therapeutics are out on the market, I mean, one of the big challenges is teaching clinicians to write scripts for software. No one taught me how to do that when I was in medical training, so that's a new thing. But what we are able to do is see the patient's usage of the therapeutic, see their engagement, and then see their clinical outcomes, and also start to link those with health claims to look at value. So I'm very optimistic about, across a whole range of diseases, just like my peers here on this panel, what we can do with treatment modalities like this.
Yes, thank you so much, Yuri. This is amazing. All the things we can do now that we never thought we could do in the past. I mean, I say this often, but it always makes me feel like Vesalius, who was dissecting bodies and sort of like, oh, this is the heart, these are the lungs. It's like this whole new way of thinking about medicine and you're very right. We never learned in medical school how to deal, we never learned, prescribe something digital, use electrodes on your hand to treat tremor. Never did we ever think this could happen. And the variety of products we've already talked about, electricity, magnetics, digital therapeutics. Next speaker, we're going to go to Eric Chan, who will talk to us about the Digihealer. Now, this is not the inhaler of your grandmother. This is something really new, and I really look forward to hearing about it.
Thanks, Pamela. Can you hear me okay? Great. Yeah, so it's pleasure to be here at Galien Week, and honored to be with these other panelists. I come from a kind of product management software background and worked most of my career in startups. Now, of course, I work at Teva Pharmaceuticals, which is a company of, I think we're around 50,000 people. So I think these other speakers are making me miss my former life, which was a little bit simpler. But yeah, pleased to be here. And yeah, the product we're showcasing this week is called the Digihealer, and it's used to basically treat asthma, which, as you know, is a very common disease. It affects over 300 million people globally. Some of the side effects are, shortness of breath, wheezing, chest pain, and even trouble sleeping. So it's a chronic disease. There's no, cure for it. So the best we can do is really, right now at least, is attack the symptoms. Obviously, one of the common ways of doing this is through inhalers, like Pamela mentioned. There's two kinds of inhalers mainly that are used by patients. So one are called the rescue or reliever medication. So these are ones that are used to treat symptoms as they occur and to try to kind of keep those symptoms under control. So when you're having an asthma attack due to allergy or maybe some kind of issues with the air quality or the temperature of the air, that can be an issue. And then the other class is what we call the maintenance or controller medication. So these are medications that patients are prescribed to use on a regular basis so that they don't get into that bad situation in the first place. However, the classic problem we're seeing, or we basically known for ages, is that patients often will underuse their controller medication. So because there's no immediate hit or benefit from the medication, it's very easy to just forget to take it. And these medications have only a long-term effect. So you really have to take them over a long period of time on a regular basis for them to really take their full effect. And when you don't, what happens is, you end up with your asthma that's not as controlled as you want it to be. And by that means you have more asthma attacks. It means you use your rescue inhaler more often. And what happens there is there's more side effects that are associated with that class of inhalers. So obviously, beyond just your symptoms that you had to begin with, now you have to also deal with potential side effects from overuse of medication. Another issue too is that maybe you are taking your medications at the right time, but your technique is off. So if all of you know the classic inhalers are kinds that you kind of pump down on and then an aerosol is released, it's very easy to get the timing off so that the medication is firing, but you're actually inhaling either a bit too early or a bit too late. So you think you're getting the medication you need, but you're actually not. You can often get trained with your doctor in the office when you go in for your visit to get proper training. But what we've seen through the evidence is that the longer you're away from your doctor, the more chance there is that this coordination degrades. So and then the other issue too, I would say, is because there's no real digital component to this, or at least there wasn't until a few years ago. When you go to see your doctor and they're asking how you're doing, there's never really a complete reliance on that data. They know how they were doing the last 30 days or last 60 days. Oftentimes they know they haven't been adherent, and they'll maybe not tell their clinician the truth. I've heard of stories anecdotally where patients will actually, before their appointment, dispense their inhaler just so that it appears as if they used it. So this is obviously not the situation you want to be in. So the solution we came up with was to basically digitally enable inhalers. So we've actually built an electronics module that sits on top of the inhaler. It will basically record when you use your inhaler and then also how well you used it. And then we have a companion app that we offer patients that they can download, pair with their inhaler, and like this, they can get reminders of when they should be using their medication, which obviously was a problem before. And then the converse happens as well. So if they use their inhaler too often, the app will basically detect that, notify them, that they may be using it too often, remind them of the fact that there are side effects with these medications. And likewise, we have a flow sensor in the inhaler as well. So beyond just knowing if you took your inhaler too often or too little, we can actually also tell the patient how they're doing in terms of their technique. Are they breathing in deeply enough so that they receive all their medication, or do they perhaps need retraining? And then all of this data is available not only in the form of notifications, but also retrospectively, so they can go into their app, view how they've been doing over the last week, over the last month. And then the last piece of our solution is actually to be able to communicate that data to clinicians. So clinicians have a web dashboard that they can access and essentially view this information real time, so that when a patient comes into the office, they can review objective data on the history of how the patient is doing. Thank you.
Yeah, this is amazing. And you can see how this would really advance the care in asthma, how people can use their inhaler better. We know more about how it is used. And your story about discharging the inhaler before they came into the doctor, I mean, oftentimes we've wondered about that when you do clinical trials, and are they really taking their meds or just sort of filling it out in the car or, you know, whatever they're doing. So this, hopefully everybody, this gave you a really nice overview of the variety of products we're looking at here with that the Galien Foundation is looking at in the best medical technology product. We're gonna finish with a question at the end about sort of the future and what that might look like. But before we go there, there's some things that have been in the news lately, and even today in the Hill, it said that the next FDA commissioner must address health disparities and barriers to care. So I wonder how you think about that, being in the technology space. Not everybody has the same Wi-Fi connections. We all heard about children, about 30% weren't able to access their Zoom calls. How do you think about that in context of your technology that sort of more or less relies on some of that infrastructure to be in place? And then the other part of that is the reimbursement question, like how do you write a script for technology for an app? So how does that come into play? I'm hoping you all will have a variety of thoughts around that and look forward to hearing them. And I think everybody can unmute and just sort of, we can have a conversation about this, I think.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump right in. I mean, we launched our product in September of 2019. We didn't actually bring forward a patient portal or an app to go along with it until probably middle of 2020. Our technology has everything it needs to care for our patients. And so we have onboard motion sensors that allow for the initial calibration of the technology. So the device itself is programmed to ask a patient to do a tremor task. They do that task. The onboard motion sensors adjust our waveform to match the needs of the patient automatically. And then the onboard sensors and battery life the memory life can last for about 3 months of dosing and therapy readings without ever connecting to the internet. Now, in our initial product, we actually did in fact install a cellular chip into the base station. So when the patient does recharge the device, typically at night, we are able to upload it directly. And so within that first year, we had tremendous amount of early adopters, obviously, but we had access to all of the real world data. So we were able to know dose by dose tremor benefits. We were able to see how a patient interfaced with their technology without even sharing with them and opening up a patient portal so they could see their data. We've now done that and we offer that to our patients, but that was an important first step for us to validate that we did not need pure connectivity all the time to be able to care for our patients. The second part of your question around reimbursement is a big passion project of mine. I mean, one of the things that I feel is I say we have the opportunity to allow our patients to wear our technology and to benefit from our therapy, but we also have the obligation to seek reimbursement for it. And so that's been the journey we've been on for the last 2 years, working directly with Medicare to in fact achieve unique codes and ultimately now be able to pursue reimbursement on behalf of our patients.
Fabulous. Anyone else?
I'm happy to kick in. I think it's slightly different than Renee's. So with us, I already mentioned the sort of technical differentiation we have. So we were able to offer sentinel lymph node biopsy in places that can't access nuclear medicine or don't have the infrastructure for nuclear medicine. And so there's sort of a supply chain aspect there. But what it means is, it's not that a patient needs to go to a major medical center that has nuclear medicine. They can use a local clinic. And you'd be surprised at how travel is a big barrier for a number of patients. And so being able to make it more available technically is important to them. But even on the cost side for large, academic hospitals, we've heard from one big group in Texas, they say they're saving about $4,000 per patient. That's about $1 million a year in that hospital. But there's also that aspect of it, which is decreasing the cost. So being able to make it more available. So we've designed our product to be a global product. As I mentioned, we're in over 43 countries now. And what we find in doing that, not just designing for the US, but designing for every market, is really focusing on making our system accessible. And that means not only from a technological perspective, but also from a cost perspective. And a third thing that we haven't done a lot about, but I bring up as maybe another thing to discuss, which is coming to clinical trials and how a lot of people have heard, that, hey, drug works great on the trials group, and it turns out there were, a bunch of white men. And diversity is important in general, but certainly when it comes to clinical trials. And we didn't start out designing our trials to have that diversity built in, but one of the things that we've done is by having a global marketplace, it allows us to understand the care needs for different ethnicities, for a larger variety of patients. But we now try to incorporate that thinking when it comes to doing clinical trials for new products.
Fabulous. And Yuri, I'll ask you as well, with requiring, access to internet and things like that, how have you thought of Pear Therapeutics making your solutions available to everyone? Substance abuse and things are not limited to white males, as Eric said. There's a lot of, it affects every part of society. What have you done and how have you thought about this? And then sort of this idea about how do you get physicians to prescribe an app to a patient?
Yeah, I love this discussion, and we could probably spend several hours on it. So I'll try and be concise. I mean, I think you highlighted, Pamela, the advantage up front of being able to provide access. Many of these are patients that either geographically aren't able to get access. Eric pointed that out, but also temporally, can they get treatment late at night, on the weekends, et cetera. So being able to have something that's available and meeting them where they are. I've been personally very surprised at, though, the high rates of mobile device ownership. We see patients across socioeconomic and racial, ethnic, and educational backgrounds having mobile phones. Frankly, in the substance use space, many of these patients, their mobile device is how they get access to their substances. And so that is important, and they have text. Now, oftentimes their phones are older, and so we have to spend a lot of time making sure that we support what might normally be thought of as like legacy devices, so older operating systems, high prevalence in Android versus iOS. But one other thing that we do is, as you mentioned, we help to architect and manufacture the software in a way that it doesn't need to be online all the time to be used. And so actually the majority of the clinical content is set up so that the patient does not actually have to be online. We do recommend that they get online once a week, but that can be done by going to the clinic, can be done by going to a restaurant like McDonald's or a library. So there are multiple ways that we try and help, and that's just to share information so that when they see their clinician, that it can get uploaded. There definitely is more that we can do there. I mean, when you look at the cost of supporting wireless and data plans compared to the cost of managing many of these diseases, I think it's frankly a very clear ROI for us to even provide patients with mobile devices, because it supports a number of different ways. But that's a probably separate conversation. I think just to build on like two other really quick things is the underserved. So when we look at different socioeconomic and racial, ethnic, and education groups, it's really important that we design our software that they can use this, that there's acceptability and feasibility from a language, cultural adaptation. And so this is an area that we spend a lot of time on and continue, and we published data, for example, in patient populations, and just as an example, like in, for example, either Asian Americans and Native Hawaiians or American Indian and Alaskan Natives. We're doing all kinds of work across those to better understand what are the similarities and what are the differences, and how do we help patients across all those backgrounds. We also build this into health literacy to making sure that different levels of educational attainment that the patients can engage. And then lastly, I'll just say, though, that Renee mentioned this as well, is the importance of bringing this data together around access to support reimbursement. I mean, in the field we are in as well, there's a huge lack of parity between physical health and mental health. And we really have to see the importance of having parity in reimbursement across any type of disease area, and not to have a disparity in those patients with mental health.
Yeah, I think it's so important that you bring that up, those disparities between clinical health and mental health. Having a child with mental health issues, it is not good. And it needs to change. One of the things that I found striking is, Yuri, you talking about the support you give to patients to be able to use your products. And I wonder, Eric, if that's the same with your Digihealer, if you found that the support you had to give was different to be able to reach everyone so that everyone can benefit from a product like yours, like the Digihealer.
Yeah, definitely. I'll echo some of the points that Yuri brought up. So, we've experienced the same issue. So, I think this notion that a lot of users out there don't have phones is actually turning out not to be as true. I think, now if people have to choose between a landline at home and a cell phone, they get the cell phone, right? So usually it's very common that at least one member of a family will have a phone, if not, all adults, at least in the family. Our technology was architected so that, you could actually track other members of your family on your own phone. So let's say your teenager is the one with asthma and using our product. They don't necessarily have to use their own phone. It could be, their data can be transmitted to their parents' phone, and then that's how the HCP is made aware of the data. Likewise, in terms of the compatibility, this is not just a world of $1,000 iPhones. We have to be compatible with all kinds of phones, especially on the Android side is where you can find much less expensive hardware. And same in terms of older phones. You want to make sure that you, as much as possible, stay compatible with some of these more older operating systems. So that's something we take a lot of care to make sure we stay compatible with. One recent feature that we added was actually translations of our app into Spanish. So beyond just English, we now offer a second language in the US, and as we expand internationally, that's something we're going to have to address as well. And then I think in terms of the, going back to the accessibility question, I think from our perspective, it really comes, our challenge, I think, is really to show the ROI in our solution. So what happens when you, cannot control your asthma properly, the most likely outcome is that is an ER visit, which, for a health system is much more costly than dishing out an inhaler with a nominal increase in price due to the electronics on it. So from our perspective, really being able to show either payers, pharmacy benefit managers, or even Medicare and Medicaid that they gain more through the solution on the than any cost that on the front end is hopefully where we can make some strides.
Great. I think it's impressive to see how many positive health benefits there could be had from products that 10 years ago we could have never, well, maybe more than 10, because Eric, yours was 2010. So let's say 20 years ago, we couldn't have thought about before. Before I go to the next question, I just want to make sure that the audience has an opportunity and remembers to put in questions for this panel. I just want to leave 1 second to see if anybody had any thoughts spurred by the discussion we just had that they wanted to quickly circle around, and otherwise we'll go to some other questions.
I just had one quick thought, which was I mentioned that we launched our device without any connectivity for a patient to access it. We actually launched our portal in middle of last year. In about February of this year, we actually added in an ability for a patient to do virtual onboarding. Now, our patients who are getting a Cala prescription are 70 years old. And what we've seen is we actually have seen virtual onboarding take off like wildfire. So our patients are actually coming to our website, about 40% of them, and virtually onboarding with their technology. So if COVID's taught us one thing, it's that everybody now is learning how to be self-sufficient and to be connected. And so it's been a really nice sort of silver lining to learn that about ourselves and about our patients through COVID.
Yeah, that's wonderful that you learned that and that you made that available, because it's the Geek Squad exists for something, right? People need help, and the way you can do that in a virtual world is so much easier. And teaching people how to use everything and making sure they're onboarded properly is really important. And it's not just ethnic and racial diversity. It's rural, urban, it's older and younger, and things like that we all have. We have to make sure we bring everyone along on this journey, and not just the few that happen to have an iPhone, or my daughter, my teenage daughter, right, who could do this with her eyes closed. All right, so I'm still waiting on some audience questions, but until we get those, I have sort of a forward-looking question. Future tripping is what we would call it, with my daughter in her mental health care. But one question is sort of, where do you see this next wave of innovations going in your product area? What are the things we haven't seen that are possible that you're excited about? And then to sort of think about, what might Galien see in the next 10 years? Like, what is that going to look like? Do we even know? So I'll just open that up for some discussion, because I think this is such an awesome space to be in. And it is amazing if we think about the opportunities we have to improve everyone's health on this planet. I'll just open it up for discussion, so please chime in.
Maybe I'll start with one, given the pandemic background, and I think it relates to the poll that you gave earlier. But certainly the advancements in vaccines, even if they were sort of in the oven already, the RNA type vaccines, seen not only the power that they have, but also the safety profile they have, as evidenced in the rollout, really speaks not only to future vaccines for communicable disease, but also to things that respond well to immunotherapies like in cancer. And I think that space is very exciting and probably will look completely different than the sort of nascent vaccine view that we have right now, 10 years from now. So I'm really excited by not only what that did for us in the last 18 months, but also what that has coming down the pipeline for humanity.
Yeah, I think this whole COVID episode has been awful and terrible, but it has given us ways to think about certain aspects of health differently. And vaccine development is certainly one of it. Connectivity and what you can do there is another one. Yeah, I totally agree. It's been interesting. Let's just call it that. Yeah.
And I think it's also not just the technical side, but also thrown in a broader conversation about access to vaccines. And is it morally right that we should be vaccinating our children when adults in other in other areas can't get access to vaccines, particularly when we're in a global connected environment? And even though it's not heartening answers to those questions at the moment, at least the discussion is there. And so a lot of these global healthcare issues are being discussed, and I think that's quite exciting too. And I hope that leads to further developments in the space.
Yeah, I agree. That should lead to a world equity situation that is better than what we've had before. Totally agree. Eric,
I can probably jump in. Yeah, so I mean, it's just staying in kind of my space of connected devices for patients. The one interesting thing I see, I wouldn't say we're even scratching the surface yet. I think we're at least in the asthma space. I feel like we're moving from basically no knowledge at all, or basically relying on patients' recollection, which is not entirely trustworthy, to now almost with our technology having a deluge of data, and we're actually seeing clinicians almost overwhelmed from having nothing to now seeing minute by minute when are these patients using their where I see this going is really, taking all that data and actually doing something with it, and actually being more of a guide to both patients and clinicians. So rather than just, bombarding them with data, actually providing insights into, hey, you're trending down this week, you're trending up. If you're an HCP monitoring multiple patients, it wouldn't be great if you can have your job made easier and have exact specific patients highlighted as the ones, if you only have 30 minutes to reach out to, patients, which are the ones? Why would you have to be the one to spend the time to analyze the data when a computer system can just as easily do it? So that's one exciting area. I think we're hoping to take our technology, and I think a lot of different technologies could probably go. And then the other one, this is maybe many years in the future, but I think at one point, a lot of the disease is the same for many people, and after a while you start to recognize patterns in the symptoms and the usage of medications. Wouldn't it be great to have more of a predictive mechanism to actually warn HCPs or even patients of impending issues with their conditions before they even happen? And I believe all this is possible with the amount of AI that's being injected into solutions these days. So definitely where I'd love to see our solution go, where it's beyond just raw data being pushed on somebody, but actually have technology be a companion to both the patient and the HCP.
I think that's such an important point. And I think, Renee, you might be in the same situation where you have a therapeutic, but now you're collecting data that nobody ever had. And sort of the insights we learned for disease in general, and specifically, tremor in your case, are going to be amazing. Do you have any other thoughts about what the future may bring in your space?
Yeah, no, I think, listen, we believe that we're pioneering this whole field of bioelectronic medicines, electricity as medicine, but doing it in body warm form factors. I mean, everything we've modeled after from a scientific standpoint is looking at gene printing stimulation, is looking at, where we're able to put electrodes into different or onto different organs to increase a therapeutic benefit. Nerves are built to carry electrical signals. And so we're just doing what the body is meant to do. For us, we believe that there are tremendous opportunities. Obviously, the neuroscience field and oscillations in the brain, and we're not only focused on tremor. We believe we've got other indications near term for us is looking at tremors in Parkinson's patients and addressing the needs of that patient population. Beyond that, we have fields of psychiatric conditions, cardiovascular conditions, and then lots and lots of neuroscience conditions. So stay tuned. We do believe we've got a nice leadership position here. Obviously, not ever without competition, but I do think the future is doing things with electricity as a medicine, but doing it in wearable form factors.
Fabulous. And Yuri, turning it over to you, the opportunities are fabulous in what you're creating, and what is that next version of 10 years from now, things that we can expect from digital therapeutics in general, and maybe more specifically from you?
Sure. So maybe I'll mention kind of the near term, and then, like you said, I'm not sure I have a crystal ball quite out to 10 years, but I'll try. So, I mean, I think first and foremost, as we discussed earlier, is just all of us helping educate clinicians as to how to use our existing innovative products like we've just all talked about, right? And it's a lot of education. It's a lot of education of all the different stakeholders, all the way through from patient to prescription to reimbursement. I would say the patients actually get it the easiest. They're like, I do everything else on my mobile device. Why would I not do this? It's the clinicians. We're a little slower, and reimbursement systems need to catch up. But I think we're going to see more and more use every day of these types of therapeutics and products. And I think we're also going to see expansion into a lot of different disease areas. And just for speaking of PAIR specifically, there's so many diseases. I mean, we're near-term focused on neuropsychiatry. Makes sense. The first pass organ is the central nervous system, but there's enormous opportunity in oncology and cardiovascular. So I think that's probably immediate term, really next 1 to 2 years. And we'll continue to see more expansion in disease areas. I think the second thing that I'm really excited about, and this really is across all the different product classes that we just talked about, it's also true to PAIR, is integrating and developing innovative care models, given the innovation that's occurred during the pandemic. So right now, we really see this opportunity, I think, to look at what is the right amount of face-to-face, in-person, virtual versus asynchronous care, and how do we develop novel models that take advantage of that improve outcomes, that get the right patient to that right care model, but also reduce overall cost of the health system. And then the third area, and this is probably looking more and will increase in the longer term, and Eric's product, I think, is a great example of this. Reset-O is an example of this, is truly integrating and converging digital with pharmacotherapy and different types of invasive or molecular therapeutics. I think there's an enormous opportunity for us to bring those modalities together. Right now, it's kind of like you have telemedicine, where we're copy and pasting what we do in a face-to-face into in front of a video. We have digital therapeutics. We have molecular therapeutics. But the opportunity to really integrate those in a tight way is to me really exciting, particularly as we see increased accuracies in sensors, the ability to actually take internal signals from the physiology or pathophysiology, and then actually have that information in real time integrated back into, say, a digital treatment, and have bi-directional information flow. So that's probably looking further out, but something I'm really excited about, and I think we're going to see.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask our technical crew, thank you for all of your comments, to put up the poll results. But what I'd like to do to end, we have like 3 minutes left, is for everybody in one sentence to sort of say, what are you the most excited about? What gets you up in the morning to improve health for people around the world? And I'm going to go opposite of how I've normally gone. So you get to go first.
I would say access and outcomes.
All right. I'm going Eric next.
Me, Eric, or Eric Tan?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, Yuri sort of got mine too, and it is around access to healthcare, whichever way it comes.
Fabulous. We'll go to the next Eric. I should have said Eric M and Eric C. Apologies for that. Oh, you're on mute, Eric. Eric C, you're on mute. No.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a recurring theme, I think, for me too. It's a question of, it's great to hear these individual stories of patient success, but you really want the population outcomes is really what springs to mind.
Fabulous. And Renee, you get to round off the panel here.
Yeah, big theme for me is around the data and how we can actually use it to the better care of our patients, better information for our physicians, better costs for everybody, better access for everybody. But data is mission critical. No longer do I believe there will be anything, dumb devices anymore. I think all medical devices are going to be smart in the future.
That will be such an improvement. And I will round it off. I'm going to ask for the poll results again. I think we're having a bit of a technical issue there. But my goal is that we can use all of this to create better clinical trials as well, to test the stuff up front better so that we can really guarantee those outcomes for everyone across the world. And it looks like we have a pretty divided result here in our polls. It's sort of, I guess, I don't know what the statistical margin is here, but like, we don't really have clear front runners, but the vaccine.
The last one is 45% for widespread use.
Oh, you know what? I didn't scroll all the way down.
You have to scroll.
Good thing we have some technical folks on the line here. So thank you all for that. And it is right, it's widespread use of patient-friendly digital and biosensor platform technologies. And I would be amiss to say that is all of what you guys presented to us today: patient-friendly access and digital platforms. So thanks again, everyone. Thank you, audience, for listening. And please reach out to us if you have any questions. Good luck to all the panelists. I know you're on the line for a big prize for the Oscars. So I wish you all the best for that, and hope to see some of you in person at the forum and at the gala this Thursday coming up. It'll be an exciting week in medicine this week. Thank you very much. And thank you for the Galien Foundation for putting up this webinar. It's been my pleasure to walk you through it and talk to all of you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.